We've told you about the AMCA, but what about aircraft without pilots? Because that, as we know, is of course not just the present, but the future as well. We've seen combat drones in operation in conflicts across the world. India is building a stealth unmanned combat vehicle called the Ghatak. It's something you've heard about here on Battle Cry before, but things thankfully are moving forward. But once again, there could be some red flags. And like any good project, these red flags need to be acknowledged so that the Ghatak is delivered on time. Battle Cry has forced a national spotlight on India's advanced drone program. The previous episode of this show not only revealed that India's most urgent drone program, Tapas, has been dropped by the armed forces, but triggered a huge conversation within the military, government and veteran community over just why India, a country that has successfully developed fighter aircraft and helicopters, has simply failed to develop a drone of acceptable quality and performance. Battle Cry has forced a conversation where troubling questions are finally being asked. Is the Tapas failure really about technology or a failure of leadership? Is it really about performance or a total lack of accountability? With the Tapas now stalled and a separate program called the Archer NG becoming the drone of focus, is India's drone program learning lessons or simply lurching from one crisis to the next? More importantly, can the armed forces afford another failure to deliver? Enter Ghatak, a futuristic Indian unmanned aircraft program. One that you've seen several times before right here on Battle Cry. The Ghatak, seen here being tested in miniaturized form, is intended as a fully stealth pilotless aircraft. Shaped unconventionally like a flying wing, crafted to be nearly invisible to radar and other ground sensors, allowing it to penetrate hostile airspace, conduct precision remote-controlled airstrikes, and return undetected or at least untouched. Unlike the Tapas, the Ghatak isn't a mission mode program, which means it isn't time-bound and isn't being developed to achieve a specific current military mission or objective. Also, the Ghatak is not yet a sanctioned government program, since it is still a long way to its intended operational reality. But that doesn't mean it isn't a crucial project that the Indian military doesn't have its eyes on. And it doesn't mean that its makers have a blank check when it comes to time and money. And it certainly doesn't mean that the project has the luxury of being unduly tinkered with. But that is precisely what appears to be happening. And it isn't Battle Cry saying it, but a former project director of the Ghatak program itself. Battle Cry has learned that a few years ago, the Defence Research and Development Organization, or DRDO, proposed that the Ghatak project be shifted to one of its own laboratories from the Aeronautical Development Agency, an autonomous consortium of agencies that developed the Tejas fighter and is developing India's future piloted combat aircraft as well. Despite the agency's resistance and the Indian Air Force's warnings against any such tinkering, the Ghatak program was shifted to an aeronautical laboratory under the DRDO, with at least one Indian Air Force estimate suggesting that this move would set the program back by 5 years. On its part, the DRDO could well argue that shifting the Ghatak program to a different laboratory is to optimize development, allowing the original agency to focus on manned or piloted aircraft, while the new home of the Ghatak focuses strictly on unmanned drone programs, including the Tapas. Some would say that those speaking out are merely disgruntled over narrow turf battles and unhealthy inter-laboratory rivalries. But there are those who believe it is precisely this sort of random, midstream tinkering that harms programs, leaving room for accountability holes, lack of continuity, failure to deliver, competing interests, and individual egos and turf wars, all afflictions that have harmed a multiplicity of military programs in the past. With the failure of the Tapas to enthuse the military, so much so that they firmly closed the door on the project, Does the future-focused Ghatak become something of a test case? Because even if the Ghatak isn't mission mode or time-bound, its intended missions, that is airstrikes on enemy territory, are hardly beyond the realm of reality. It was only 5 years ago, remember, that the Indian Air Force conducted piloted fighter strikes on Pakistan's Balakot. Will a crucial, futuristic drone program also fall hostage to organizational failures? Or will the Ghatak have a very different flight path and lease of life?